Alex had always dreamed of traveling to distant worlds. Being a diplomat, it was part of his job. But this time, it felt different. He wasn't just there to sign treaties or broker peace. He was on a mission to stop a war that threatened to tear apart an entire galaxy. The alien world of Virilia was known for its lush green forests, towering crystal structures, and technologically advanced society. However, beneath the beauty of it all, there was political tension, and Alex had arrived to help prevent it from escalating. He'd been on the planet for 2 weeks, meeting with local leaders and representatives from various factions. Everything seemed calm on the surface, but Alex knew it was only a matter of time before something triggered the unrest that had been brewing for years. His job was to find that trigger before it was too late. One morning, Alex was given a tour of the royal palace. It was grand, far beyond anything he'd ever seen. The walls were made of shining, translucent material, and the air smelled of fresh flowers and clean ozone. As he followed the palace guide down a long hallway, he couldn't help but notice how serene everything appeared. It was hard to imagine any kind of conflict in such a peaceful place. But peace didn't last long. As Alex turned a corner, he was met with the unexpected sight of a woman standing at the end of the hall. She was dressed in a flowing gown, her long dark hair cascading down her back, and her presence seemed to command the room. He could tell immediately that she was no ordinary person. Her posture was regal, and her eyes held a sharp, intelligent gleam that made Alex feel as though he had been caught doing something wrong. Before he could even greet her, the doors at the end of the hall suddenly burst open, and a group of armed guards rushed in. The woman turned quickly, but there was no time to react. One of the guards raised a weapon, aiming directly at her. Without thinking, Alex acted on instinct. He sprinted forward, his heart pounding, and shoved the woman out of the line of fire just as the weapon discharged. The blast hit the wall behind them with a loud bang, and Alex found himself in the middle of the chaos. The guards froze, their eyes wide with shock as they stared at Alex. For a moment, no one moved. "Who are you?" one of the guards demanded, his voice shaking with surprise. Alex stood in front of the woman, his hand on her arm to steady her. He didn't know what was going on, but he wasn't about to back down. "I'm a diplomat from Earth," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I was just passing by when I saw her in danger. She didn't deserve to be attacked." The woman, still trembling from the shock, finally spoke up. "This is Princess Lyra of Virilia," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. I did not expect this." The guards seemed to relax at her words, lowering their weapons, but their eyes remained fixed on Alex. The leader of the group stepped forward cautiously. "Princess, are you all right?" Lyra nodded, her gaze fixed on Alex. "I'm fine, thank you," she said, though she looked more confused than grateful. "But why would you risk your life for me?" Alex hadn't expected her to ask that. He had acted without thinking, without truly understanding the consequences, but something in her eyes had made him act. She was a princess, yes, but she was also a person who had been in danger, and he couldn't just stand by and watch her be harmed. "I didn't want to see anyone get hurt," he said simply, his eyes meeting hers. "No one deserves that." Lyra stared at him for a long moment, as if weighing his words. The guards had stepped back, but the air was still thick with tension. Alex could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He had no idea why Lyra had been targeted or why someone would try to hurt her, but he knew one thing for certain. Things were about to get a lot more complicated. The princess took a deep breath, her expression hardening. "You should leave now," she said, her voice soft but commanding. "It's not safe here." But Alex didn't move. "I'm not leaving," he replied firmly. "Not until I know what's going on. And I think you could use some help." Lyra's eyes narrowed. She looked at him for a moment, then seemed to make a decision. "Fine," she said, her tone shifting slightly. "But you'll regret this. Virilia is no place for someone like you." Alex raised an eyebrow. I'm not afraid of a little danger. Lyra gave him a small wry smile. Then you truly don't understand the kind of danger you're in. Before Alex could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed through the hallway. Another group of guards appeared, this time from the opposite direction. They moved quickly, forming a circle around Lyra and Alex, their weapons at the ready. This is getting out of hand, Alex muttered under his breath. He had no idea what was really happening, but it seemed like the princess was at the center of something far bigger than just an attack. Lyra's expression turned grim. You're right. I didn't want this to happen, but now it's too late. Alex had no idea what she meant by that, but he knew one thing. His life had just become infinitely more complicated. Alex had never felt the weight of a decision as much as he did in the moments following his agreement to help Princess Lyra. The consequences of their actions were far-reaching. He had only been on Virilia for a few days, yet it felt like he was already part of something far bigger than himself. He had never intended to get involved in alien politics, but now that he was, there was no turning back. The following morning, after a restless night spent contemplating everything that had happened, Alex found himself standing outside the royal chamber, awaiting Lyra. He had been summoned by her to discuss their next steps in secret. The room was quiet, almost eerily so, and Alex couldn't shake the feeling that their every move was being watched, even here in the heart of the palace. As he waited, he thought back to his conversation with Lyra the night before. He had agreed to help her, but now the reality of it was starting to hit him. They were up against an entire system, a system that was deeply rooted in tradition and power. Lyra was no ordinary princess. She was heir to the throne of Virilia, a world that had been ruled by her family for centuries. And yet, it seemed her only real choice was to fight for her survival. The door to the royal chamber opened, and Lyra appeared, her face serious, though she gave him a nod of acknowledgement. "Good morning, Alex," she said, her voice calm but with an edge that told him she was just as anxious about the situation as he was. "Good morning, Your Highness," Alex replied, bowing his head slightly in respect. He wasn't sure if he should call her Your Highness or just by her name, but it felt appropriate, given the circumstances. Lyra motioned for him to follow her inside the chamber. It was a large room with tall, sweeping windows that offered a stunning view of the alien world. But Alex couldn't focus on the view. His mind was still racing, trying to process everything. "I've been summoned to a council meeting this afternoon," Lyra began, walking over to a large desk filled with maps and documents. "It's a formality, but my presence is required. I will announce my refusal to marry Prince Ferris there. If I don't, I risk losing the support of the nobles, and the political balance will shift even further in his favor." Alex watched her closely as she spoke, admiring the determination in her voice. She was determined to fight, even if it meant risking everything. He knew this wasn't going to be easy, but he also knew that he had made the right decision in helping her. "Do you have a plan for what happens after the announcement?" Alex asked. He needed to understand exactly what they were up against. Lyra paused, her eyes thoughtful. "I don't know. There's a chance the council will support me. After all, many of the noble families do not want Prince Ferris to take the throne. He's too ambitious, too power-hungry. But if they don't, I'll have to make my own path. The only way to ensure my safety is to align with the factions that oppose Ferris. If I can gain their support, I might be able to force him into a corner." It was clear that Lyra wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for her people, too. The throne of Virilia was more than just a title for her. It was a responsibility. But the weight of that responsibility didn't seem to scare her. If anything, it only made her more determined to succeed. "I'll be with you, every step of the way," Alex said, his voice steady. He wasn't sure if he could truly understand the gravity of her situation, but he knew he couldn't walk away now. Lyra gave him a small smile, one that was filled with gratitude. "I appreciate that, Alex. I don't think I could do this alone." The atmosphere between them shifted slightly, and Alex felt something unspoken pass between them. He wasn't sure what it was, but he knew that their connection had deepened in the last few days. They had become more than just allies. They had become friends. But the calm didn't last long. Lyra's expression turned serious again as she began to organize the papers on her desk. "I've made my decision," she said. "I will announce my refusal to marry Varys today. But we need to be prepared for what happens afterward." Alex nodded, his thoughts racing. "Do you have any allies in the council? Anyone who might stand with you?" Lyra hesitated, clearly weighing her options. "Some, but not enough. Most of the council members are loyal to Varys, either out of fear or because they see him as the only one capable of maintaining order on Varelia. But there are a few who have always been skeptical of his rule. If I can convince them that my leadership will be better for the planet, we might have a chance." Alex's mind was already working through the possibilities. What if we could gather support from outside the council? From the common people? Lyra raised an eyebrow. "That's a bold idea. But it's not impossible. There are always factions who are unhappy with the current regime. If we can make them see that there's a better way, we might be able to rally them to our cause." Alex smiled, feeling a surge of hope. "We'll need to move quickly. But I think we can do it." Lyra's gaze softened, and for the first time since Alex had met her, she looked hopeful. "Thank you, Alex. I never thought I'd find someone like you on Varelia. But I'm glad I did." The sincerity in her voice left Alex momentarily speechless. He had come to Varelia expecting to do his job and leave, but now he realized that he had become part of something far more important. He wasn't just helping a princess escape an arranged marriage. He was fighting for her future, and for the future of an entire planet. And for the first time, Alex felt like he was where he was supposed to be. The day of the council meeting arrived faster than Alex expected. He had spent the night strategizing with Lyra, going over what they needed to do. He was nervous, but he couldn't show it. Not now. The stakes were too high, and he had come to realize just how much this meant to Lyra. She wasn't just fighting for her throne. She was fighting for the future of Varelia, and maybe even her own survival. Alex was standing at the entrance to the council room when Lyra arrived. She was dressed in the royal robes she had worn countless times before, but today she wore them with a different kind of energy. An energy that came from knowing she was about to take control of her destiny. There was a strength in her eyes now, a resolve that had been building ever since their first meeting. She was no longer the uncertain princess Alex had met days ago. She was a leader, ready to face the challenges ahead. Lyra glanced at Alex, giving him a brief, reassuring smile. "Stay close," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "I'll need you to back me up today." Alex nodded, his heart racing. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew that standing beside her was the right choice. As the doors to the council room swung open, Lyra stepped forward, and Alex followed. The room was filled with murmurs of surprise and disbelief as they entered. The council members, mostly older men and women, glanced at each other, clearly unprepared for Lyra's unexpected arrival. They had anticipated that she would follow their plans for her marriage to Prince Varys, but Lyra had other ideas. The head of the council, Councillor Velis, a tall and imposing figure, stood up as she entered. His expression was one of shock, and he quickly masked it with a stern, unreadable face. "Princess Lyra," he said, his voice cold, "we were not expecting you today." "I'm sorry to disappoint you, Counselor," Lyra replied, her voice calm but firm. "But I have important matters to address with the council." Velis raised an eyebrow, his eyes narrowing slightly. "This is a formal gathering, Your Highness. If you have a request, it must be made in accordance with the proper procedures." Lyra took a deep breath, her back straight as she stepped forward. "I'm not here for a request," she said, her voice unwavering. "I'm here to make a declaration." The room fell silent, all eyes on her. Alex stood quietly behind her, watching the reactions of the council members. Some seemed uncomfortable, while others seemed genuinely shocked. The tension was thick, but Lyra didn't flinch. "I refuse to marry Prince Varys," Lyra announced, her words ringing out in the silent room. "I will not be forced into a marriage for the sake of political gain. My life is not a tool for the benefit of anyone else. I will decide my future, not the council, not my family, and certainly not Varys." A stunned silence followed her words. Alex could hear his heart pounding in his chest as he waited for a response. He knew that what she was doing was risky, but he also knew that she was right. She had to take control, or she would lose everything. Councillor Velis recovered first, his face hardening. "You are making a grave mistake, Princess. You defy the will of the council, and by doing so, you endanger the future of Varelia." "I am not the one endangering Varelia," Lyra shot back, her voice sharp. "It is the council that is blind to the truth. Varys does not care about our people. He only cares about power. You would hand him the throne and allow him to destroy everything we've worked for. I will not stand by and let that happen." The other council members exchanged uneasy glances, but no one spoke. Lyra stood there, unyielding, as she awaited their response. Alex could feel the weight of the moment, and although he wasn't sure what was going to happen next, he knew this was a turning point. Finally, Councillor Velis spoke again, his voice colder than before. "You are a fool, Princess. If you think you can go against the council and win, you are gravely mistaken." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "I may be young, but I'm not foolish. I know what's at stake, and I know what must be done. If you want to continue serving Varys and supporting his plans, then you will be the ones who are foolish. But if you stand with me, if you truly care about Varelia, then we have a chance to build something better, something stronger." There was a long pause as the council members remained silent, unsure of how to respond. Alex could feel the tension in the room, and he couldn't help but wonder how this would all unfold. Would they side with Lyra, or would they choose to continue supporting the prince? Finally, a voice spoke from the back of the room. "I stand with Princess Lyra," said Councillor Erin, an older woman with graying hair. She was known for her progressive views, and her words seemed to carry weight in the room. "The council may be stuck in the past, but Varelia deserves better. It deserves a leader who will put the people first, not a prince who only cares about his own ambitions." Lyra's expression softened, and for the first time since she had entered the room, she allowed herself a small smile. "Thank you, Councillor Erin. Your support means more than you know." One by one, more council members began to speak up. They voiced their support for Lyra, agreeing that a change was needed. It wasn't unanimous, but it was enough. The tide had begun to turn. But Lyra knew this wasn't the end of the fight. "I don't want your support just for today," she said, her voice steady. "I need you to stand with me from now on. Varelia cannot survive under Varys' rule. We need to unite, not just within this council, but with the people. Together, we can defeat him." Alex watched as Lyra made her final plea. He could see the fire in her eyes, the same fire that had drawn him to her in the first place. She was more than just a princess now. She was a leader. And for the first time since arriving on Varelia, Alex believed that they might actually have a chance. Lyra's bold declaration had shaken the council, but it was far from over. While some of the council members stood by her, others were not so easily swayed. Prince Varys and his supporters were furious. They had spent years working to secure his claim to the throne, and Lyra's refusal to marry him was a direct challenge to everything they had planned. After the council meeting, Lyra and Alex retreated to the royal palace's private quarters. The weight of the situation was heavy, and despite the small victory they had gained, the true battle was only just beginning. Alex sat by a window overlooking the city, his thoughts a whirlwind. The view from the palace was breathtaking, towering crystal structures reaching toward the sky, and the shimmering blue of the ocean beyond. But even the beauty of the landscape couldn't erase the tension that filled the air. The planet of Varelia was on the brink of war. Lyra entered the room, her steps echoing softly on the polished floor. Her face was a mask of determination, but Alex could see the worry in her eyes. She had already lost so much, and now she was on the verge of losing everything. "They won't stop, will they?" Alex asked quietly, turning to face her. Lyra shook her head, her eyes dark with concern. "No. Varys and his allies are already planning their next move. They'll try to turn the people against me. They'll use anything they can to weaken my support." Alex could feel the weight of her words. If they weren't careful, the peaceful world of Varelia could descend into chaos. A civil war was the last thing they needed. But Lyra wasn't the type to back down. She had already made her choice, and now she was willing to fight for it. "We need to find a way to unite the people behind you," Alex said. "If we can show them that you're the true leader, the one who wants to build a better future, we might have a chance." Lyra's eyes narrowed with determination. "I've spent my whole life preparing for this moment, Alex. I know what needs to be done. But the problem is, the people are scared. They've been taught to fear change, to believe that Varys is the only one who can maintain order. We have to show them that there is another way." Alex thought for a moment. What about the factions that are already against Varys? Could they help? Lyra nodded. "Some of them are already on our side, but we need more. If we can unite enough of the opposition, we might be able to challenge Varys head-on. But it won't be easy. His supporters are powerful." Just then, the door to the room opened, and a guard stepped inside. He bowed slightly before speaking. "Your Highness, we've received a message from the Outer Territories. They want to meet with you." Lyra's expression darkened. The Outer Territories. They've always been hesitant to get involved in royal politics. What do they want? The guard hesitated before answering. "They say it's urgent. They want to offer their support, if you agree to certain conditions." Lyra exchanged a quick glance with Alex. The Outer Territories were distant regions of Varelia, largely unaffected by the capital's politics. Their people were known for being independent, and they hadn't taken sides in the struggle for the throne. If they were offering support, it could be a turning point. "Prepare for the meeting," Lyra said, her voice steady. "We'll go." As they made their way to the palace's meeting room, Alex couldn't help but feel the weight of what was about to happen. This wasn't just about a royal marriage anymore. This was about the future of an entire planet. The Outer Territories had the resources and influence to make a real difference in the coming struggle. But they wouldn't help unless Lyra could convince them that she was the right leader for Varelia. The meeting room was large, with long tables and high ceilings. The Outer Territories representatives, a group of rugged individuals with hardened faces, stood at the far end of the room. They were led by Commander Toran, a tall man with piercing eyes and a strong, imposing presence. "Princess Lyra," Commander Toran said, his voice deep and commanding. "We've been watching the events unfold in the capital. You've made quite the statement, but actions speak louder than words. You want our support. You'll have to prove that you can defeat Varys and his supporters." Lyra stood tall, her gaze unwavering. "I don't expect you to take my word for it, Commander, but I can offer you a choice. A choice between standing with the people of Varelia and watching as Varys drags this planet into darkness." Commander Toran regarded her for a long moment, his face unreadable. Finally, he spoke again. "You'll have our support, but you need to act quickly. Varys won't wait long. His army is gathering, and we believe he's planning an assault on the capital." The news hit like a punch to the gut. Alex could see the tension in Lyra's face, but she didn't falter. She nodded slowly. "We will prepare. If Varys thinks he can take us down by force, he's wrong. Then we'll be ready," Toran said, his voice firm. "But make no mistake, Princess. If we're going to win this, we need everyone. The people, the military, the council. You can't afford to alienate anyone else." Lyra took a deep breath, her mind racing. She had just secured a powerful ally, But the road ahead was still fraught with danger. If they were going to defeat Varys, they needed more than just military power. They needed the support of the people, the hearts and minds of Varelia's citizens. "We'll do whatever it takes," Lyra said, her voice steady. "We won't let Varys win." As Alex stood beside her, he couldn't help but feel a growing sense of hope. This was far from over, but Lyra had proven time and time again that she was willing to fight for what was right. And with the outer territories on their side, they now had a chance to stop Varys before it was too late. The days that followed were filled with tension and preparation. The alliance with the outer territories was a crucial step, but there was still so much to do. Prince Varys's supporters were gathering, and every move they made seemed to lead the planet closer to open conflict. Time was running out. Alex watched as Lyra worked tirelessly, meeting with various factions and advisors, ensuring that her message of unity and change reached as many people as possible. She was determined, unwavering, but he could see the toll it was taking on her. She rarely slept, often staying up late into the night, making plans and working to secure the support of the people. Alex knew that, as much as he wanted to help, he could never truly understand the weight of the responsibility Lyra carried. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for an entire planet, for the future of her people. It was a burden he couldn't imagine. One evening, after another long day of meetings, Lyra collapsed onto a chair in her private quarters, her eyes weary but determined. Alex was sitting across from her, quietly reviewing some documents when she spoke. "We're running out of time," she said, her voice soft but resolute. "Varys's forces are marching toward the capital. If we don't act soon, we could lose everything." Alex put down the papers and leaned forward. "What's the next step?" "We need a plan, something that will push him back before he has the chance to strike." Lyra's eyes narrowed as she thought for a moment. "We need to send a clear message, a message that I am the true ruler of Varelia, not him. The council may have been divided, but the people are still watching. If they see that we are willing to fight, willing to stand up to him, they will rally behind us." Alex nodded. "And what about the council? Some of them still support Varys." "They will have to choose a side," Lyra said firmly. "I've already made my declaration. The council must either stand with the people, or they'll stand with Varys. There's no middle ground anymore." Lyra stood up and walked to the large windows of her chambers, her gaze drifting over the city below. The sight of the towering crystal buildings, shining under the fading light of the setting sun, reminded her of the world she was fighting for. It was a beautiful planet, full of potential, but it was also a world on the edge of a precipice. Alex watched her from across the room, sensing the weight of her thoughts. She had come so far, but the road ahead was still uncertain. "We've done everything we can to prepare," Lyra said, turning back to face him. "Now it's time for me to make my final stand. Tomorrow, I'll address the people. I'll show them that I'm ready to fight for their future." Alex stood up as well, walking over to her. "I'll be with you, every step of the way." Lyra gave him a small smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I know you will, Alex. I couldn't do this without you." The next day, Lyra addressed the people of Varelia from the steps of the palace. A crowd had gathered, their faces a mix of hope and fear. They had come to hear what the princess had to say, and Lyra knew this moment would define everything. She stepped forward, her voice ringing out clear and strong across the crowd. "People of Varelia," she began, her gaze sweeping over the gathered masses. "I stand before you today as your rightful ruler, not because of birthright, not because of a crown, but because I believe in this planet and its people. We are stronger than any one individual, stronger than any ruler who would try to control us. The time for change is now." The crowd was silent, hanging on her every word. Alex stood in the background, watching as Lyra spoke with passion and conviction. Her words were more than just a plea for support. They were a declaration of independence. She wasn't just challenging Prince Varys. She was challenging the very system that had kept her people in chains for centuries. I refuse to be a pawn, she continued. I will not marry Varys for the sake of political gain. I will not allow this planet to fall under the control of someone who seeks only power. Virelia belongs to its people. Together, we can build a future free from fear, a future where we choose our own path. The crowd remained silent for a long moment, the weight of her words sinking in. Then, slowly, one by one, they began to cheer. First a few voices, then more, until the entire square was filled with the sound of applause. Lyra stood tall, her heart pounding in her chest. She had done it. She had taken the first step towards securing the future of Virelia. But the fight was far from over. Prince Varys would not give up easily, and neither would his supporters. But in that moment, with the people rallying behind her, Lyra felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. But even as the cheers of the crowd echoed through the air, Alex knew that they couldn't afford to get too comfortable. Varys wouldn't let this go. He would retaliate, and they had to be ready. Later that day, Lyra received word that Varys's army was just hours away from reaching the capital. The time to act was now. Lyra, Alex, and their allies quickly made their way to the palace's war room, where they would finalize their strategy. It was all coming to a head. We need to prepare for a siege, Lyra said, her voice steady. We'll need to hold the capital long enough for the people to rise up against Varys. If we can defend the palace, we can win this. Alex looked at her, his heart heavy with the weight of what was about to come. But he also knew that Lyra was ready. They were ready. The final battle for the future of Virelia had begun. The night before the battle was tense. The sound of footsteps echoed through the long corridors of the palace as soldiers and advisors moved about, preparing for the siege. Outside, the sky was dark, the stars barely visible beneath the thick clouds that rolled in from the sea. The air was heavy with anticipation. Everyone knew that tomorrow would determine the future of Virelia. Lyra sat in the war room, staring at the map spread out before her. Her fingers traced the lines that marked the city's defenses, the points where Varys's forces were expected to attack. The palace, a towering structure of crystal and steel, was the heart of the capital, but it was also its most vulnerable point. If Varys's army was as large as they feared, holding the palace would be no easy task. Alex entered the room quietly, his footsteps almost silent on the stone floor. He had been helping coordinate with the outer territories, gathering their forces for the final stand. The alliance they had formed was strong, but it was still uncertain whether they could outmatch Varys's loyalists. Lyra looked up as Alex approached, meeting his gaze. There was no time for comforting words or reassurances. They both knew what was at stake. "Everything is in place," she said, her voice calm but serious. "The people are ready. We just need to hold the palace long enough for them to rise up against Varys." Alex nodded, his face grim. "You've done everything you can, Lyra. Tomorrow, we'll fight for your future and for the future of Virelia." Lyra gave him a faint smile. "It's strange, isn't it? How quickly everything changes. One moment, I was a princess with a destiny I never chose, and the next, I'm leading an army against a man who spent his life plotting to take everything from me. I think you've always been ready for this, even if you didn't know it," Alex replied. "You've never backed down from a fight. You've always fought for what's right, and that's why the people are with you." Lyra's smile grew slightly. "I hope they're with me tomorrow." The next morning, the palace buzzed with activity. Soldiers hurried through the halls, preparing for the defense. The sounds of marching footsteps echoed outside, the weight of the approaching battle bearing down on everyone. Lyra stood at the front of the war room, her gaze steady, her mind focused on the task ahead. She had made the decision to fight, and now there was no turning back. Alex joined her side, his presence a constant reminder of the alliance they had forged. They had worked together to rally the support of the people and the outer territories. Now they would see if all their efforts had been enough. "We have one chance at this," Lyra said, turning to the soldiers gathered around her. Varys's forces will attack with everything they have, but we won't back down. We fight for Virilia. We fight for the future of our people. And we fight because we know that this planet deserves better than a ruler who only wants power." The soldiers cheered, their voices filled with energy and determination. Alex could feel the tension in the air, but he also felt a sense of unity. They were all fighting for the same thing: freedom, a future without fear. Lyra had inspired them, and now it was time to put everything on the line. Outside, the distant sound of war drums could be heard, signaling the approach of Varys's army. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest as she looked out over the city. She had no illusions about what they were up against. Varys's forces were large, and they would not hesitate to do whatever it took to win. But Lyra had something they didn't. She had the support of the people. And that, she hoped, would be enough. "Are you ready?" Alex asked, his voice low. Lyra nodded. "I'm ready. This is our moment, Alex. We can't let it slip away." The battle began with a fierce clash. Varys's army stormed the city gates, their weapons raised, their cries echoing through the streets. Lyra and her forces fought back with everything they had, pushing the invaders back from the palace gates. The outer territory's soldiers, fierce and determined, fought alongside the city's defenders, their loyalty to Lyra solidified in the heat of battle. But the fighting was brutal. The streets of the capital became a battlefield, smoke rising from the fires that had been set in the chaos. The palace walls trembled under the force of the oncoming assault. Lyra's heart raced as she fought, directing her soldiers, coordinating the defense. She couldn't afford to lose focus. Not now, not when everything depended on her. As the battle raged on, Alex stood beside her, doing his part to keep the soldiers motivated and focused. He had seen his fair share of danger, but nothing had ever felt quite like this. The stakes were higher than ever, and he knew that if they lost this fight, everything Lyra had worked for would be lost. But despite the chaos around them, Lyra remained calm, her eyes never wavering from her goal. She moved quickly, decisively, rallying the troops, making sure they held the line. She wasn't just a princess anymore. She was a leader, a symbol of hope for the people of Virilia. Hours passed, and the battle seemed to stretch on forever. But slowly, the tide began to turn. The people of Virilia, who had once been afraid, now stood up and fought alongside their defenders. They rallied behind Lyra's call for freedom, for a future without Varys's rule. And then, just as the sun began to set, the sound of Varys's army began to fade. The last of his forces retreated, defeated by the combined strength of the people and Lyra's leadership. It was over. The palace stood tall, the city was safe, and Virilia had been saved from the brink of destruction. Lyra stood at the front of the palace, looking out over the city she had fought for. The battle had been won, but the real work was just beginning. There was still much to be done to rebuild, to ensure that Virilia would remain a place where freedom could thrive. Beside her, Alex smiled. "You did it." Lyra looked at him, her eyes shining with a mix of relief and determination. "We did it. Together." And with that, the future of Virilia began to unfold, one where the people, not the powerful, would choose their own destiny. Alex had never imagined he would be caught up in something like this. After the incident with the guards, he found himself walking alongside Princess Lyra through the grand hallways of the royal palace. The once calm atmosphere had shifted, and now tension hung in the air. His mind was racing with questions, and although he was still trying to make sense of everything, there was one thing he knew for sure. This wasn't going to be a simple diplomatic mission. As they walked, Lyra remained silent, her posture stiff as she led him toward a private chamber deep within the palace. The guards had reluctantly stepped aside, but their watchful eyes never left them. Alex could feel the weight of their stares, but his focus was entirely on the princess beside him. She had a grace about her, something regal in the way she carried herself, but there was also a sadness that seemed to cling to her. "Why were they trying to kill you?" Alex finally asked, breaking the silence. Lyra didn't respond right away. She kept her eyes straight ahead, her footsteps echoing softly in the quiet hall. After a few moments, she stopped and turned to face him. There was a guarded look in her eyes, but she seemed to know that avoiding the question wouldn't help. "I am the heir to the throne of Varelia," she began slowly, her voice quiet but firm. "And right now, there are factions in my world who do not want me to rule. They want someone else to take the throne, someone they can control." Alex felt a pang of sympathy for her. She was young, only in her early 20s, and yet she was already caught in a web of political intrigue. The last thing she needed was to be caught in a struggle for power that threatened her life. "They want me out of the way," she continued, her gaze distant. "And the best way to do that is to eliminate me. But they can't do it openly. Too many people would object. So they send hired hands, trying to take me by surprise." She paused, glancing at him. "And you just happened to be in the wrong place at the right time." Alex couldn't believe how calm she was, considering the danger she was in. Most people would have been panicked, terrified, but not her. She seemed to have accepted the constant threat to her life as a part of her reality. "You're not like the others, are you?" Lyra suddenly asked, her eyes narrowing slightly as she studied him. Alex was caught off guard by the question. He hadn't expected her to ask him anything. "What do you mean?" he replied, slightly unsure of where she was going with this. "The other diplomats," she explained, her voice soft but sharp with underlying frustration. "They come to my planet, smile, shake hands, and pretend that they care about our future. But they don't. They're all just trying to make deals, to use me for their own gains. They see me as a tool, nothing more. But you don't seem interested in that." Alex thought for a moment before answering. "I came here to help. My job is to make sure peace is kept, not just to negotiate deals." He didn't know if she believed him, but it was the truth. Lyra studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "You really do think differently, don't you?" He couldn't help but feel a bit relieved at her words. He'd always tried to be genuine, especially when it came to matters like diplomacy, but it wasn't always easy to get people to trust you, especially not royalty. They reached the doors of her private chambers, and Lyra motioned for Alex to follow her inside. The room was decorated with beautiful tapestries, the colors rich and deep, and there was a soft glow coming from the windows, which looked out over the alien world. The view was breathtaking, but Alex had no time to appreciate it now. As the door shut behind them, Lyra turned and faced him. There was a certain intensity in her expression now, a sharpness that hadn't been there before. "I don't trust many people, Alex," she said, her voice quieter now. "But I need your help. I can't do this alone." Alex was taken aback. "Help? What do you mean?" Lyra looked away, her eyes distant once more. "There's a man, Prince Ferris, who is the one behind the plots to assassinate me. He's been trying to force me into an arranged marriage with him, hoping to control the throne through me." She clenched her fists at her sides. "I will not marry him. I will not be controlled." Alex felt his heart race. He'd heard of Prince Ferris, of course. He was the heir to another powerful family, known for his ruthless tactics and ambitions to expand his influence. It wasn't surprising that Lyra's refusal to marry him would be met with such violence. What did surprise him, however, was that Lyra had the strength to stand up to such an intimidating figure. "I can't help you if I don't know what to do," Alex said. "You need a plan." Lyra turned back to him, her eyes narrowing. "That's where you come in, Alex." She stepped closer, her voice low. "I want to take control of my own fate, but I need someone by my side, someone who isn't afraid to stand up to everything that's been planned for me." Alex felt a sense of urgency in her words. He knew that helping her would put him in even greater danger, but he also knew it was the right thing to do. "All right," he said, his voice steady. "What do we do next?" Lyra gave him a small smile, the first real smile he had seen from her. we fight back. Together.